What's up, guys? DS3TV here, and we are here to watch another Overly Sarcastic Productions video, and this one is History Summarized Cleopatra. And yeah, so let's get into it. Also subscribe to the channel. Want to get 1,000 subscribers by Valentine's Day, and also let's thank you guys for 350 subscribers. That is insane. And yeah, so let's get into it, and let's learn some stuff about Cleopatra that you might not have known.
Cleopatra. Pretty straightforward story. Shakespeare tells us that she's the gorgeous queen of Egypt and master of the art of seduction who banged her way across Rome to get power, ultimately ruining her own empire before committing Cobra-assisted suicide. Couldn't be easier, right? Wrong. For starters, never trust a leading question, but secondly, and actually on topic, Cleopatra's real story is rather less uniformly disparaging and far more interesting. History's pervasive problem with Egypt's final pharaoh is that she...
Hey boys, I see you playing the game of playing a transcontinental game of Musical Thrones in an attempt to become a sole monarch. Room for one more.
She usually plays a side character in Roman history rather than ever being the protagonist in her own right, and her story usually gets smeared in the shuffle because of it. It also didn't help that the only historical sources that we have on the matter are from Romans, hence the Rome-centrism and the casting of her character as a seductress with a habit of ruining otherwise perfectly blameless great men. But such is life. So, to get at the woman behind the myth, let's do some history. Cleopatra's story actually starts 300 years earlier when a Greek kid named Alexander decided that he wanted to own the entire planet. So he marched eastward, beat the Persians, and conquered everything in sight. When he died 20 minutes later without a clear line of succession, his generals scrambled to claim their corner of the fragmenting Macedonian Empire. The general Ptolemy got his hands on Egypt and became King Ptolemy, kickstarting a dynasty that I can only describe as deeply unpleasant to trace. And speaking of, click the video on the top right if you want to watch me lose my freaking mind attempting to document the chronology of that lineage. But, unsettling family politics aside, the Ptolemaic
323 to 330s BC, strictly speaking, but it all started to crumble after 200 BC. You get Greek culture. You get Greek culture. Everybody gets Greek culture.
dynasty ruled during the so-called Hellenistic era, where Alexander's successors spread Hellenic, that is to say Greek, culture out to Syria, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. Although our story takes place along the Nile, the ancestry of the Ptolemaic rulers and the culture they promoted were unmistakably Greek. Fast forward 3 centuries and we have Cleopatra VII and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII. Both lived in the beautiful city of Alexandria, the 1st century BC's knowledge capital of the entire Mediterranean world. Between the superbly stocked library, the abundance of mathematicians, poets, scientists, philosophers, and rhetoricians, and the fact that she was a princess, the young Cleopatra had the best education possible in the entire Greek world. And unlike a lot of her party-crazed ancestors, she actually put in the effort. She would have been raised on Homer, Herodotus, Plato, Aristotle, all of the classical works we know, and a lot of the ones that we've lost in the meantime. After memorization, the focus shifted to composition, making arguments, telling stories in varied ways, not just knowing, but thinking, and ultimately, speaking. And that's the crucial point. During her life, Cleopatra wasn't described as spellbindingly gorgeous, but rather she was captivating. She was known to be the ultimate conversationalist, and that's how she won people over. None of her ancestors before her were exceptionally intelligent, and none of them bothered to even learn how to speak Egyptian, but Cleopatra could charmingly convince anyone of anything in one of 10 different languages. Bottom line is the lady was smart, okay? Because I feel like that point is all too often ignored in favor of how supposedly hot she was. So anyway, when Cleopatra's father Ptolemy XII died, the throne passed to her prepubescent brother Ptolemy XIII, and she served as his co-monarch. Interfamilial scheming was no stranger to the Ptolemies, and after a couple years of power jockeying between them, Ptolemy made the political and military friends he needed to force Cleopatra into exile. But at the same time, another much bigger civil war was afoot. Namely, Caesar was busy staging a gigantic coup and chasing Pompey across the entire Mediterranean. Now, Pompey was close with the Ptolemy kids on account of business with their father, and Cleopatra's hope was that she could promise Egypt's armies in his fight against Caesar if he kicked out her brother and made her queen. Solid plan. But the boy King Ptolemy decided that Caesar was a better bet, so he had Pompey killed the second he arrived in Alexandria. Caesar was deeply irritated at having his victory yoinked, so he angrily plopped himself down in the royal palace. Cleopatra saw an opening and got to work. Casually strolling into the palace wasn't an option on the count of her still being in exile, so she stealthed her way in. Stories of her coming to Caesar neatly wrapped in a fine rug to get past the guards likely derived from the queen being stuffed in a much less conspicuous laundry bag instead. And by the way, when you do put your queen in the laundry, it's machine wash cold and then tumble dry low. There's not a tag, so it's hard to figure out sometimes. Anyway, as Shakespeare would have it, the whirlwind romance begins from that very minute, with Cleopatra's first major act being one of seduction. Now, that wouldn't be a particularly high bar to clear, given Caesar had an affair with every woman who so much as made eye contact with him, but...
Yep, and I think I've talked about this a lot before, but I'm going to say it again. He slept with his bodyguard's wives. That's kind of the reason why he got killed.
The evidence points to any romance between the duo happening a little further down the line. While I don't doubt that Cleopatra eventually developed googly eyes for the sharpest cheekbones in the Mediterranean, she needed an ally much more than a boyfriend. That was just a bonus. Likewise, Caesar probably realized after about 2 minutes of talking to her that she was a far more useful ally and grain provider than the young, dumb, and already on thin ice Ptolemy. They both had what the other wanted, a good friend in a soon-to-be high place. But it wasn't as simple as high-fiving and conquering the world together. Ptolemy and his army blockaded Alexandria, and the new power couple was stuck in a besieged royal palace for 6 months. Caesar put his neck out by betting on Cleopatra, and side note, that's not the kind of thing that Caesar, of all people, would do for just some crush. Cleopatra was clearly a valuable ally in Caesar's eyes, and not just a pretty face and figure. However, by the time that Caesar's reinforcements arrived to break the siege of Alexandria and defeat Ptolemy's armies, the two had spent plenty of quality time together. They were lost in endless conversation, she was pregnant, they were tagging each other in memes, it was true love. And by this point, Caesar had conquered the entire Mediterranean. But instead of immediately going back to Rome to be dictator, he spent an extra year touring Egypt with Cleopatra. When he returns to Rome, he publicly acknowledged Cleopatra's son Caesarion as his child. While Caesarion wasn't in line to gain much in Rome, he would spend the next 2 decades preparing to become pharaoh of Egypt. But our most pressing concern here is Cleopatra, who now fully and finally became queen, and she wasted no time in carefully tending to a kingdom that its rulers had largely ignored for centuries. As queen, Cleopatra took on the role of Isis and...
In this temple-side relief, Cleopatra is shown as Isis, with the Caesarion playing the role of Horus. Isis's son, canonical son. While we're at it, Isis's husband was Osiris, the dead one, and hey, look at that, Caesar died.
Incarnate. Every bit of iconography, be it art, dress, coinage, or ceremony, all proclaimed the same message. Hi, my name is Cleopatra, and I will be your goddess. While Isis was essentially a universal deity in the Hellenistic era, Cleopatra had 2 main roles to fill: the protector of justice and the mother of, well, everything. To that end, actually being a mother was great PR for her because she really got to lean into her relationship with the fertility of the Nile River. Agriculture was everything on the Nile, and after her father went bankrupt by bribing Rome not to annex Egypt, she made effective use of a strong bureaucracy to make sure the economy ran smoothly. When your entire country lives and dies by the flooding of the river, there really was no room to be laissez-faire about it. And as it happened, she had to deal with a string of droughts in the early years of her reign, which she handled remarkably well. The Ptolemaic rulers were the most notorious party animals on Earth, and Cleopatra was no exception to that affinity for pageantry. She differed in that she utilized that revelry to make religious and political statements, and she recognized that being a queen necessitated actually doing work. Whenever she wasn't hosting a royal function or ceremony, she was reading and writing letters, addressing complaints from people up and down the Nile. She was also very attentive to the strife between Greeks and Egyptians. Most civil disturbances stemmed from that simple divide. So Cleopatra presented herself as a queen for both her fellow Greeks and for the population of Egypt that was, well, you know, Egyptian. Because no one in her family had bothered to do that before her. She held corruption accountable, provided for her people in equal measure, embraced the Egyptian aspects of her role as pharaoh, and, again, actually spoke Egyptian. Every other Ptolemaic king used the throne as an excuse to party all day and all night, but not Cleopatra. In her 18 years as queen, her reign can be summarized with just a single sentiment. She cared. Meanwhile, on the Roman side of the Mediterranean, which is to say the entire rest of the Mediterranean by this point, Julius Caesar got super murdered and his adopted son and second-in-command were busy chasing down the assassins in Greece. After that mess cleared up, the young Caesar Octavian took command of the west, while Marcus Antonius held on to the east, and with it, most of the land and sea that bordered Egypt. As the conventional story goes, Antonius summoned Cleopatra to the Anatolian city of Tarsus, and she delayed to build the suspense, but they fell in love the instant they met and it was immediately off to start a dynasty together. Again, no. Beyond the suspected eyelash fluttering and the known fact that Antonius would bang anything that even moved, let's look at some practicalities first. A decade earlier, Rome suffered an embarrassing loss against Parthia. Caesar was planning a campaign to avenge it, but the dying business threw off his schedule a little bit. Antonius, sitting pretty in the east and looking to inherit Caesar's legacy, was hell-bent on launching that campaign. But Rome was actively broke from fighting the assassins, and Parthian campaigns were stupid expensive. No one else but Cleopatra's Egypt could fund that expedition. On her end of things, Egypt could only stay independent by Rome's goodwill, and what better will is there than love? The story of the following decade is a quiet one for Cleopatra, and almost solely revolves around her lavish and ruinous affair with Antonius. But here we need to consider the exclusively pro-Octavian sources that we have for this. As far as anyone writing during the Roman Empire is concerned, Caesar and Octavian were the winners and therefore the good guys. That's why with Caesar, Cleopatra is portrayed as a mysterious and dramatic ally, but for eventual loser Antonius, Cleopatra is said to have bewitched him into a life of enslaved debauchery and ruined everything. So after things got going, yeah, they did love each other and she had 3 kids by him, but there's more actual strategy going on here than the ancient Roman tabloids would have you believe. Cleopatra's solo story stays quiet in the Roman sources because there's no scandal and efficient government. That said, Cleopatra had a string of good times in the following decade. Her empire was prosperous, secured by bloodline, and enhanced by the small but generous gift of Cilicia, Syria, the Levant, Cyrene, and Cyprus. You know, nothing too fancy, just a return to the full extent of the old Ptolemaic Empire. It's one of those feel-good gifts, like scented candles. So basically, in 37 BC, Cleopatra was rolling in it. She had pretty much everything she wanted, and when Antonius set off to conquer Parthia the next year, she would become empress of the entire East. Cities were already minting coins with both of their faces on them. He was Dionysus and she was Isis. The pair of rulers was literally a match made in heaven. Except for the fact that after that, it wasn't. Like, at all. So, unfortunately, the Parthian campaign was a total disaster and Antonius lost 1/3 of his army just on the retreat. Whoops. Cleopatra was still doing really well, but it's after 36 that her beloved Antonius started to be more of a liability than a help. At this point, Octavian smelled blood, so he cleverly gave Antonius an impossible choice. He sent his long-suffering sister and Antonius' actual Roman wife Octavia to the east along with 2,000 soldiers. The message was clear: reject Cleopatra and accept Roman help, or forfeit the army and your wife and keep your Egyptian harlot queen. Cleopatra couldn't lose her ally, so it was do or die. Literally. Professionalism. So she laid on the affection to win Antonius over. I mean, it worked, but now they were in it together until the end, and the writing was just starting to appear on the wall. To turn things around, Cleopatra did what her ancestors did best and threw a celebration. With the alliance of Antonius and Cleopatra stronger and more interdependent than ever, they decided to flex their might. During citywide festivities, Cleopatra was declared Queen of Kings, with her son Caesarion, proclaimed to be Caesar's rightful heir in a very pointed jab at Octavian, declared King of Kings and successor to the throne of Egypt. As for her children with Antonius, Alexander Helios was crowned King of Armenia, Media, and Parthia. The last 2 they didn't even own yet. Cleopatra Selene was given Crete and Cyrene, while Ptolemy Philadelphus got Phoenicia, Syria, and Cilicia, almost all of which belonged to Rome just a few years earlier. As far as the happy couple was concerned, the entire East belonged to their family, and they had the pan-imperial iconography to match. Egypt and the Roman East were gone, and in its place was the new empire of Antonius and Cleopatra together. However, this was a colossal slap in the face to Rome, and Octavian had a very easy time convincing the people and his armies that Marcus Antonius had sacrificed his Roman identity to consort with this dangerous and dastardly Egyptian queen. I go into both the propaganda war and the actual war between Octavian and Antonius in this video here, but for our purposes, Cleopatra's grand gesture at the so-called donations of Alexandria became her complete undoing. After their defeat at Actium, again, up over here, click it, go watch it, it was game over. The final months and moments of the star-crossed couple have been unsurprisingly romanticized to death, literally, so there's no way to actually know what's up, but we can take some educated guesses. After Actium, Antonius was a despondent mess, and his soldiers were defecting hourly, but Cleopatra was still planning ways to escape and turn the tables while consoling Antonius at every turn. That strength of character is nothing short of astounding. Even here, in total defeat, she never quit. In the end, there was no defeating Octavian. Though she threatened to burn the entirety of her treasure if he tried anything sneaky, he captured her and demanded that she be the main trophy in his victory parade. And that was something that she would not do. With her lover already dead and her children by him promised to live with the infinitely accommodating Octavia, Cleopatra instead chose death. It wouldn't have been by a snake bite, though. Those really hurt, and she had painless poisons for that kind of thing. Per the leaked will of Antonius, the two were buried together in Alexandria, where they've gone undiscovered to this day. So, that is the roller coaster that was Cleopatra's life.
They're still undiscovered to this day? I did not know that. That's actually kind of crazy.
It's been twisted every which way to suit the needs of 2,000 years worth of writers, but under the slabs of romanticized gossip, Cleopatra was a woman who used her genius, her wealth, her power, and to a certain extent her sexuality to accomplish her many goals. Throughout her life, she planned carefully and worked hard because she cared. And, if only briefly in the grand scheme of things, she achieved some insane stuff. She's arguably the most powerful woman in history, and you could easily make the case that during her lifetime she was the smartest, most accomplished person on the planet. But of course she also had boobs and did the sex sometimes, which is clearly the takeaway historians, playwrights, and storytellers should be focusing on. That surely won't give anyone a dangerously reductive impression of one of history's most interesting people, or diminish a lifetime of world-shaping accomplishments to 2 boyfriends and a snake. Now, I'll link an article about this in the description, but as it happens,
Okay, so my dad just suggested this to me, and I can
archaeologist Kathleen Martinez has a really strong theory.
Cleopatra's image is getting better, but there's still work to do. Obvious answer, make a movie.
For the location of Cleopatra's tomb being under the temple of Taposiris.
So we get someone smart to write a script and show how much of a calculating badass she was.
Iris Magna, just west of Alexandria.
And here's the kicker, we get Gal Gadot to play Cleopatra.
She's been digging for several years, and at first the archaeological...
She's already been the daughter of Zeus, a Greek queen, is hardly a jump, and also Wonder Woman.
The community thought she was crazy, but as she built her case...
But come on, tell me that wouldn't be amazing.
...started discovering busts and...
That or just a crossover where Cleopatra is actually Wonder Woman, see? Okay.
Coins with Cleopatra's face on them at the site, and most recently found a staircase that runs 30 meters beneath the temple. The new consensus is she's found it. It's just a matter of digging down and getting to it. The excavation is ongoing, and with hope, we'll have Cleopatra's actual tomb in just a few years. That's awesome.
Okay, so that's cool. I didn't know that was gonna be the takeaway from today. That's nice, but yeah, so maybe, so they probably already have found it because I don't know when this video came out, but yeah, so talk to you guys in the next video, and subscribe to the channel. I want to get down subscribers by Valentine's Day, and yeah, talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.